right, hello everyone, and welcome to this event with Project Energy Society. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Warp Institute and this project, and then Jonas is going to talk about the idea behind the Energy Society. But first I would like to thank our partner here today, Helio GT30. So this this co-working space here, but they also have other locations in Stockholm and in Malmö. So if you're looking for co-working space or shared offices or events or meetings, this is a perfect partner. So thank you very much to Helio, and check them out at helio.se or talk to the staff here. They're outside here. So thank you very much, Helio, for hosting us today. Thank you very much, all of you, for showing up here for this lunch event. So Warp Institute is a non-profit foundation founded by me a few years ago. And the reason was that I saw so many new technologies, so many innovations, so many people that wanted to make a positive change in the future, now and in the future. When I met them, I felt such optimism. And then I returned to Parliament. I was a member of Parliament then, and I talked to other politicians. And I became a little bit less optimistic. And then I talked to the news media, and I became even less optimistic. And I felt after a while, okay, we're focusing so much on problems all the time. So, and it's fine to think about problems, future problems, so we can avoid them. But if we spend almost all of our time thinking about potential problems, we could be afraid of actually doing things. And we rely then on old technology that is really bad instead of new technology that is better. Also has some problems, sure, but smaller problems often. So then I felt, okay, I need to do something about this. So I started this foundation with the humble goal of making the future come sooner. And the idea behind that is to gather people like yourself, forward-looking, optimistic people, bringing them together in a global community. If we do that, and if we inject some inspiration and some knowledge, and especially get you guys to meet each other, things are going to start to happen, things that move the future forward. And Project Energy Society is exactly one of those things. I'm going to get back to that in just a minute. The core part right now of the Warp Institute is Warp News, where we write fact-based optimistic news on technology, science, and human progress. So you can find us both in Swedish and English. Our most read article so far is this one by Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired and the author of several really interesting books on technology and the future of technology. He wrote The Case for Optimism for us, Why the Future is Created by Optimists. This is, like I said, our most read article. But he also turned that into a TED Talk that now has over 2 million views. So Project Energy Society. I think the lack of energy, especially clean energy in society, is slowing us down. There are many things we could do if we had an abundance of clean, cheap energy. Just think about it a little bit. There's many things we don't do today. There's new innovations we don't do because it will be too costly or the energy is not clean enough. But if we can fix that, there's a ton of things. We can imagine a few of those things now, but when you build this kind of infrastructure, there's a tons and tons of innovation on top of that. So, and we want to do this this project. It's an open process, so everyone who thinks this is good for society and want to help us move this forward, help us achieve this vision, you're welcome to join this project. The way to do that is to sign up for our newsletter. You get a dose of optimism every Thursday at 1 after lunch, right after lunch, just when you need it the most. But you also get an update every week on the Project Energy Society. Things that are happening, coming events, workshops, things like that. We had an event in Lund in October. After that, we've started, we had a policy workshop, and we're working on some policy proposals. Thomas de Ming, for example, joined that policy workshop. So we started with policy. We're going to start writing a manifesto, but there's also a ton of other things. You don't have to be an energy expert. That's fine. We're going to need energy experts, different kind of energy experts, but it's also all kinds of different people, because it's energy society, and society is not just one type of people. So you're all welcome to join that if you like. Okay, that's about that was about Warp Institute and Project Energy Society. So what is the Energy Society? And for that we have Jonas Birgersson here to tell us about that. So please give him a warm hand, Jonas.
Thank you very much. So my name is Jonas Birgersson, and I'm very happy to be able to be here with you guys today. So this is what I do in my day job. We build fiber. We're in 10 countries now. We built in many places, of course, here in Scandinavia. In 2013, we built the fiber optical network in Israel, which is a very weird place to work. We're also doing it in Austria, which is like the opposite of each other from policy and cultural and so forth. But I'm an old entrepreneur, so why am I here starting new things again? I should be, you know, in the elderly home for entrepreneurs, and we do this kind of fun Kickstarter project. We've created, you know, a game where you move your trains around in southern part of Sweden. So that's what you should be doing when you're 51 years old and an entrepreneur. Let out to the pasture, have some porridge, and then you go into the night quietly. But I was really annoyed by the last Swedish election. For the first time in many years, there was a focus on energy and infrastructure in the election. There was a lot of talk about it. So I wanted to sit back, and being a voter, I wanted to see, you know, a smorgasbord of different good solutions on how do we fix the energy. And I was very, very disappointed, because it was only about fear. And everyday people that I meet, they were afraid. People are afraid of their electrical bill. And that started to remind me about something, because when we started the entrepreneurial journey, one of the things that we wanted to fix was that in the old days, people were afraid of their phone bills. I had the only decent job, real job I ever had, was when I studied in Lund at the university. I was working at the weekends to take care of elderly people. And I had this wonderful woman that I was, you know, helping a little bit on the weekends. She was 101 years old. And the only thing that she really, really enjoyed in her life was to talk to her grandchildren. But she did it very few times a year, on the birthday and on the Christmas, because she was afraid that she couldn't pay for the phone call, because you didn't know how much it was going to cost when you picked up the handset. And that fear reminded me when people started saying that I'm afraid to use electricity. In a modern society, this shouldn't be something that we should be afraid of. And then Matthias came to Lund, and we had an interview, and we started talking about this thing. And we've talked about the Energy Society since 96 internally, 97 externally. We can check that in the records. And we see that there's lots of things that you can do that is not being done. So if you look on this situation, this is nuts. This is not normal. 1 kilowatt of energy during a 30-day period can vary in price 1,000 times. That is not normal. That is not sound. That is not worthy of a civilized society. And this is in Swedish, and I'll explain to the English audience, but we are so used to in Sweden to have energy always on, an abundance of energy, as much as you need, and at pretty low prices. It was variable prices, but you weren't afraid of the electrical bill. But now, when you can see these kind of things, especially from the southern part of Sweden where I am, or Energy Area 4 as we're called now in the debate, you could see that the government and the authorities are preparing us by a constant feed of news that we could be in a situation where we have to turn the electrical grid off partially. But what people don't understand is that this is, you know, until it happens, people don't believe it's going to happen. But what they're saying here in these kind of articles, and this is coming from the authorities, this is not conspiracy loons, this is the authority responsible communicating with the press corps. It's that if you turn off a block, The problem is that it's not so easy to turn it back on. It's not built for that kind of thing. So if you turn it off, you plan for 2 hours of outage, it could be that it doesn't come back because something burns out and has to be replaced. But also it does something to the people living there. The first time the government willingly turns off the electrical grid in your area, something changes. You have to start taking responsibility and plan for that the electrical grid maybe not always will be there. So this is for the Swedish audience again. This is what you call, of course, now an internet meme, and this is a real picture. This is when the Swedish government had trained people, full-time employed, that were out, scanning if you had your television set on to check against the list if you had paid your license. This is real for the English-speaking audience. This was Socialist Sweden 101. But now the jokes are, yes, I'm here and I'm doing this, but now it's to see if you're burning firewood. So, but that's not the vision that I want to have for how we solve the energy situation. So I will tell you that everything is in place. The new technology is there. The solutions are there. The money for sure is there. That's the easiest part to show. So why haven't the energy system started to change in this positive direction? Well, as Yoda says it, wisdom has been chasing you, but you've always been faster. So we need new ideas into the system. And to be blunt, the people responsible today for the infrastructure makes too damn much money on this absurd situation. They have no reason to change. Okay, so what is the energy society? It's a future foresight where we say that this is the big next paradigm shift. And the paradigm shift, of course, is such a big change that whatever you think about, I like horses more than I like steam engines. Well, it doesn't matter. If you're going to be competitive, if you're going to be a society that wants to be competitive with other societies, if you want to be able to export your product and goods, you have to use the new technology. It's not an option. So, and as management, this is very important. The trick is not to try to, get the horse or the employee to work faster or more. You have to change. You shouldn't work harder. You should work smarter. And the smart way is to use new technology and new opportunities. Well, so just in a nutshell, what do we mean by the energy society? Well, I say that generation of electrical energy is really not the problem. If you look on the growth, and EU is publishing enormously good statistics on these now. Just in a 12-month period, the EU in total have increased 25% the amount of energy that they harness through solar in just 12 months. This is incredible. So wind and solar, we can generate a lot of electricity. That is not really the core problem. And when we have an abundance of this, which I am pretty convinced that we will have, we'll talk more about that later, what we will get is back to the situation where the cost of energy is irrelevant in everyday life. But it doesn't mean that we don't have challenges, but instead of seeing them as problems, this is where you can do the value creation. If you solve the distribution and storage, you enable this whole system to work together in a new way. And this is what I'll tell you about. So what I think we will have in the energy society will be low fixed price for electrical energy. And the background, and now some of you know this already, but we're doing it for everybody. This is our 101 course, and we will do many of these different courses where we'll go into the nitty-gritty details about how you do power electronics and how you do new standards and stuff. But we start from the beginning so that everybody feels welcome, and everybody can find their level of knowledge where they want to jump in and participate. Okay, so this is where we start. This is the first Ericsson phone, and it's a beauty. And you had to explain to people what you could use it for because nobody had a reference. This is one of the key individuals that led other revolution, actually here in Stockholm. Anybody knows who this is? This is Cedergren. He had an office at Drottninggatan, and he also lived at the same street. And he had really good customers from Östermalm, a prestigious area of Stockholm. And they came into the jewelry store that his father had established, and they wanted to buy jewelry. and they wanted personal service. So Cedric came up with the idea that if I have a phone, I don't need to be in the store all the time. When a good customer is coming, they could just call and he could, shuffle in and always be there for the customer. So he was one of the first customers on telephony in Stockholm. He liked the phone, he liked the idea, he was very visionary. He already talked about two-way video conferencing, but he didn't have the means to express it or to make it real. But he decided, because the Bell subsidiary for Sweden had started to build in Stockholm, the government had decided in Telegrafverket, they had made a good research about this, and they came to the conclusion that telephony was not a commercial service because nothing changed hand, so it was impossible to charge for. So Telegrafverket said, phone, no, we don't need it. Bell started to build, but then Cedergren, he was the key ingredients. He was the entrepreneur. So he started something called SAT, Stockholms Allmänna Telefon. So suddenly you had two private companies competing, and then of course the government couldn't allow that, so then they also had to create Rikstelefon. So suddenly you have three companies competing to bring phones to the population of Stockholm. And what this led to was this. Stockholm became the world's first city to reach 5,000 phone lines. And that changed everything. Today, people believe that it's a natural law that Sweden is always world-class, leading, innovating, creating new things in telephony. But this is the reason. We were first had to reach 5,000 lines. And that led to that we were first to second-degree problems. They understood that you could not do this manually when you got to a certain amount of people. It was simply not possible. You had to start to build automated switchboards. And then you got Ericsson, we got new mathematics, we got Q theory, we got Erlang. It was a Danish mathematician that worked on these telecom problems. Erlang is the term you use to optimize the phone grids. I'll come back to that later. But this was really, really important. And it always started with that people built local phone exchanges. It wasn't even connected to each other. You just in the village, you could talk to other people in the village. And then you start interconnecting them. That's how it started. So, as you could see, they tried manually as long as they could, but then they had to start automating. And when everybody else in the cities around the world got to 5,000 and beyond, Sweden could sell solutions to the first problem that they encountered. And this led to a lot of system knowledge, leading to that Sweden. This is in Lund. This is Nils Rydbeck on the left. And this is the world's first modern digital phone. So we got the NNT system in Sweden, a lot of work done here in Stockholm. Then we got GSM that was done in Lund. And we were leading because we had the system knowledge. We knew how the handsets worked, we knew how the switches worked, we knew how the digital switches worked, and then we added the radio. Okay, so the next $1 trillion question. This was the internet when we changed to that. You remember, we got the Sputnik up, the Russians had, their German scientists got the Sputnik up into space. America freaked out. They were very afraid of this. The Ruskies had, an advantage in science that was not good. That was not tolerable for the US. So they started to find a way for people to work better, even if they weren't in the same room. And this led to, as you know, ARPANET, the 4 nodes that then became the modern internet. And of course, the solution for that was the packet switch network. And this is a very, very famous, arguably one of the most interesting theses ever written, right? Winston C. Cerf and Robert E. Kahn, and this is basically the TCP/IP protocol. But you needed something else. You needed to deregulate. This was in 1981. Deregulation happened on telecom. Until that, before that deregulation, it was unlawful. You were breaking the law if you had a phone that looked good and you connected it to the Swedish system. It's what we call gristryne. You remember these things that you put in? And of course, you could buy one in Denmark, and I did. I smuggled telecom goods over the border. I was sweating in customs because I wanted to give your girlfriend, something with color and shape. But you felt also a little bit bad when you connected it. So will I bring down the whole network? I'm now breaking the law. There's only one factory and it's T-marked. There was a special stamp from this one factory in the world that were building the allowed phones to connect to the Swedish grid. And you plugged it in and the network didn't go down. But in 81, now it was deregulated. Anybody could build. And just to take it back, because people believe that internet has always been in Sweden. It really, really hasn't. This is how internet looked in the end of 1989. And if we can zoom in a little bit, we can see just in southern part of Sweden here, you see something is missing. The third largest Swedish city, Malmö, in December 89 did not have one single fixed internet connection because they didn't have a university, because this was a university network. And the ones that had fixed lines, they were incredibly lucky, and they had incredibly powerful lines, 0.064 megabits. And it was all connected to a European center. So what do you think? Berlin? Was it Brussels? No, it was CERN, because it was a research institute. This was done by the academia. So I was there 3,000 years ago when all of these things happened. Because, I'm just going to take this very, very quickly. Some of you know this, some of you don't, but we had a little firm. We had some folks believing in us, and the media had a field day when you were doing this. But that was not that important. I got to go to the White House. I had shorts there. The Secret Service said it was the first time anybody been there in shorts, but... And if you're from Lund, a lot of people, before they're 30, they write their PhD thesis. That's pretty normal. But somebody wrote a PhD thesis about me before I was 30. So in academia upon that is interesting. And then to peak and finalize my media career, I was the wrong answer on Who Wants to Become a Millionaire. So end of story, public life over. Great. But what did we actually do? It was really a cool time. In CERN, you remember, the Center of European Internet, the Americans invented TCP/IP, we're very grateful. But in CERN, in Europe, we created, with Tim Berners-Lee, we created the World Wide Web. We created the standards that made the internet more, useful for people. And here we did, this is September 96. I'm down with Søren Gyll and lots of folks from Volvo. They launched their new C70, the first car from Volvo that was cool to drive. I don't do cars, I don't know. But we did another thing. So this was the world's first product launch on internet. There was 20 ISDN lines connecting France, all of France, to the internet. And we had 2 years before, we had booked 8 of them through channels with the French Telecom. And there were special technicians, and we took these 8 lines and we put them together, and we could then send a very small picture of the Søren Gyll presentation. It was the world's first product launch on the internet. Another thing we did, also again smuggling things across the borders, this is production camera number 5 from a company called Axis. So this is the 5th produced commercial variant of their product, the first product, NetEye 200. And we connected that to the booth. So you had a live, let's say it was slow, live kind of feed from the booth. But this is interesting. This was the number 5th, the 5th that they produced. It was the world's first use of this in a product launch. And a lot of people looked at it just because they could see moving pictures on the internet for the first time. But we also did something else. We did these kind of things. And that is that we also built the world's first car configurator, where you could build your complete car online and buy it without visiting a dealership. And then we had other stores like this. I'm taking this very fast. Of course, then Nike wanted to build something stupid. So it's like, yeah, you built a car configurator. We want to build a shoe configurator. And we said, that's really stupid. And they paid a lot of money. So, okay, I'm giving this to the commercial guys. And they But this is interesting also. We created with IKEA, Europe's largest e-commerce. And this is the same year when we launched that this guy, Jeff Bezos, decided that it's probably a good idea to sell things online. He had just received his first investment from mom and dad. And he had made a list. And on the top of the list, it said, I'm going to sell books. But this was the same year. So what I want to show with this is that Europe was leading. We didn't lead in every area, but in some areas we were creating world first. We were creating lots of new things, which was a good position to be. And of course, there was a lot of growth. You remember this? So this is when we talked about, the internet, and it could become something, and apparently it did, right? It's very cool. It's the same standard here that worked with this. That's a pretty cool standard. Okay, so we did something else, and that is that we were always frustrated by the lack of bandwidth. So we created a company called the Swedish Broadband Company. And this is a really nerdy picture. This is me in the official Olympic attire for the Olympic Games in Sydney 2000. And that's the world's least trained CEO being equipped like this. But in the background, it's a pretty cool thing because we were the world's first to do 10 megabit symmetrical in 98. We were the world's first to do 100 megabit symmetric in Sweden in 98. So Sweden was really taking the lead. In 2000, we did the world's first live TV over the internet. And a lot of people had said it was impossible. If you said when you were studying at the university in 99 that you could have a real-time stream over the internet on a packet switch network when you were trying to graduate at KTH or LTH in Lund, you were failed. That was the wrong answer. It's impossible to do over a packet switch network. But it was doable, and we did it. And we got a lot of, this is also, again, Europe were leading. Sweden were leading in Europe, and Europe were participating, and we were building interesting things. Not in all areas, but in many areas, which is a good position to be. And of course, everything went to this one infrastructure, because the combination of the open standards of the internet with the power of an infrastructure built specifically for that is very powerful. Because we tried to take the power of the internet and then put it on the old phone lines. That's not a good idea. We tried to do it on the TV networks. That was also not a good idea. And today, of course, we build a custom new network. And that then gives you unlimited amounts of bandwidth at very low fixed prices. And then you can do the other things, phone calls, television distribution, on top of that as services. So it's a complete paradigm shift. And then, of course, we even got these, the new guys that, built a lot of real successful companies. Some of them are historically interested. So they remember the dinosaurs like me and Jonas Birgersson. And so, paradigm shift. What happened? Because we had the bandwidth first, we could get a new generation of new cool companies. We could take away the phone calls because we had better bandwidth. And all of these nice folks, they have said to me at one point or another, Niklas Stenström, for example, that founded Skype, he said, it was when I was sitting in my home and I got the 10 megabit connection that I understood, wow, Skype can become a factor. We can take away phone calls. We just need to get the right infrastructure. And we get the infrastructure early in Sweden, and then we'll get the real infrastructure. When everybody else gets to that, we can deploy our services. And that's the software, so that will scale beautifully. And of course, a lot of things, disappeared. This is just the amount of money. This is insane amounts of money. This was the biggest earning part of the phone companies. And of course, now nobody pays for long distance phone calls over circuit switched. So you go into this kind of quick development that creates a problem when you talk to your kids. Like, I was there 3,000 years ago and said, no, it's true. We paid per SMS. No, you didn't. That's stupid. Nobody ever did that. No, I remember it. I was there. We did it. So low fixed price. I actually happened to be in the process when this was removed, because when Telia also launched their counteroffensive to the Broadbandsbolaget in 98, then they also did a smart thing. They removed the variable price over distance. Do you remember that it was one price when you called inside Stockholm? And then if you called to Malmö, it was a different price. In 98, that just disappeared overnight. They just said, oh, we've done that for 100 years. No, don't worry about it. No, we haven't fooled anybody. No, it was never necessary. No problem. So, of course, now we have everything low fixed price. And the same thing with mobile. With Broadbandsbolaget and Orange, we won a 3G license here in Sweden. And I was on stage saying that we will have low fixed price for calls over their mobile and all the SMSs you can send as a normal person. And they said, then the bosses at French Telecom, they said, you can stand there on stage and lie because it's technically impossible. If it would be possible, we would never allow it, because we make so much money on these SMSs. And today it's standard, right? And of course the broadband, as we said. So what happens now? Well, we're in a unique situation, because what we had here in the 1890s is they built the circuit switched phone systems, and it was a beautiful technology. It was very, very impressive. And the only thing that was as impressive is that when they did the base architecture for electrical distribution, that is also incredibly robust, cool solutions with the alternative current, so AC, so a växelström. It's really, really, really top of the line, genius kind of systems that they built. But they built it before electronics, computers, and software. They didn't have that, so they couldn't use it because it didn't exist. And then we got this example. In 1990, the commercial internet is happening. And today that has had a big effect. And what I'm here to talk to you about is that I believe that we're in this path. We're going to see how we're going to internetify in the same way like we did when we take the circuit switch networks to packet switch networks. We're going to do the same thing with electricity. But just look at this just a little bit more. Okay, that's the price. So everything's okay. No, this is actually pretty interesting. Because we started to build a new network first in Sweden for broadband, did you know that the circuit switched beautiful network that was built over 125 years, on this year, 2026, the whole copper network will be completely decommissioned. There will not be a single phone connected with Gristryne in any home to call. It will be completely dismantled. Let's just trust me on this fact. This is the only fact I'm going to ask you to trust me on. If anybody would have said that in '98 in the public debate, they would have been stoned. That's not going to happen. A lot of people in Sweden still don't know that this is going to happen. But this is from the Swedish Telecom's official homepage. It's not on the top page, let's say that, but it is there. Okay, so the next trillion question, of course you guessed it, this is this. We're going to do the same thing that we did here, we're going to do to electricity. Not because this is, a bad system. It's just the very best system that humanity could build before electronics, computers, and software. But now we have those, and this impacts this enormously. So we can build now completely better networks, what we call energy sharing. And that, of course, will, in the end, give us low fixed price for electrical energy and incredible redundancy, robustness, so that you can always trust the network, even if the zombies come and do horrible things and eat a lot of people. Who believes this? Well, I believe this, but also EU believes this. This is just one of their programs, and there's already a little community of people with foil hats on the net because we launched this energy society the same day as they launched this. So they believe that we are puppets of EU. I wish. But just one program. This is just one of many programs. This is just this one program, Repower EU. This is the budget. How do you put that into any relevance? That's a lot of money. But how do you put it into relevance? Well, this program is 3 annual budgets for Sweden. So when I said that the money is there, that's not really, pushing it. There's a lot of money into this. What happened was that the not so nice Putin did horrible things to a European country called Ukraine. That took, and let's not be blunt about this, but that took the sustainability debate from a nice to have in EU to national security. Energy is not a joke anymore. This is real. That's why they're putting real money behind it and real legislation. And we'll come back to that. So what do they say? They say that we should use hydrogen, we should use solar, we should use batteries, and we should use wind. That's even not controversial anymore. And of course, hydrogen, just one quick, the cool thing with hydrogen is that it has, flow dynamics, right? So you can take a lot of energy by pouring it. You can take a gallon of energy and go, put it in something. And we have a lot of structures for that. So that's just one of the interesting things with hydrogen. But this is the really cool thing. And this is that we can build new types of neighborhoods. So these are different roles. So they just want to use energy. These guys, they want to produce a little bit. They want to produce and store locally. This is a hydrogen thing that we have commonly in the neighborhood. And these guys, they're really clever. They invested not in generation, because that's in abundance apparently in this example, but they've invested in storage. And then of course we have also common storages. So it's not about battery or hydrogen. The interesting thing from a network architecture point of view, the only thing that I really know something about, is that when you can store energy so that it's produced and used at the same second, that changes a lot. That is like night and day. That is like circuit switch phone calls, like packet switched calls over the internet. It's could solve the same problem, but it's two completely different solutions. So this is a big thing, and we can talk about that in details. I just want to go through the basic first. Of course, it's a little bit expensive to have these solutions today, but if you connect them to each other, you don't have to build all the capabilities that you need for your unit for all corner cases, because then you get a statistically aggregated network model, and that is much cheaper. And we'll come back to that later. So it's both storage and local distribution. That is the revolution in this. Of course, when you have that, you need to represent these so that you can digitally control it. That's called orchestration. And then you get to this scenario. And this is maybe the easiest way to explain it. We're still on the 101 course. It's at high level, and we'll get down to the details in the coming episodes. But this is the building. If there is solar, if there's wind, I use that live electricity directly, of course. If I don't have that, then I take the first hierarchical step, and that is that I check in my basement. If I have a battery, then I can use my own electricity. The second thing is that I can use my neighbor's electricity. And then we are in the energy community, as this is called in the EU parlance. And in my little area, we are now connected to a central node, and that node makes it possible for me to share with shared resources in the neighborhood, like an H2 storage with fuel cells. And if that's not enough, if everything here is exhausted, then I have two options. I can go and talk to another energy community and to see what they have, or I can, as a last resort, go to the national grid. But by having this, the beautiful thing with this is that it's non-hierarchical, because that's one of the big problems we'll talk about more in a sec. But if something happens to the big network, if one of the central nodes falls, it affects whole countries or whole areas of countries. If the zombies have eaten everything above here, these things still work, exactly like the internet. Okay, so maybe some of you guys did see some of the Swedish televised debates about the election. There was only one word that was used for everything, and it always was the blocking. Well, that's a good idea, but we have svängmassa. We have thousands of tons of steel rotating, creating this frequency, and it has to be very precise on the 50. If it goes a little bit there, then the transfer losses becomes colossal and everything is impossible. And it was a little bit of male energy, let's be honest, that it had to be big solutions. Or what we call the internal joke is big dick energy. And this is important. And again, as a true lover of technology, the old circuit switched phone system and the old distribution network of electricity is a thing of beauty. It's genius in its construction, but it was again constructed before there was electronics, computers, or software. And big surprise, now we have that, and that creates new opportunities. And this is one of the reasons why it's so important that we can't rely only on the old solutions. A lot of people, including myself, have been looking at these things for over 30 years, but we never talked about it publicly because we didn't want to flag how incredibly vulnerable the old big dig energy networks are. You can go to a store and for 100 euros you can buy a drone, and you can have 5 meters of copper wire and you can have that drone fly up to one of these big power plants. No, but the power plant has, meters of concrete. Yes, and thousands of miles of high electrical distribution lines that you cannot guard. It is impossible. But what happens if you drop the copper line on these things? What happens is that you get something in the end that looks like an explosion. It's not something you go and you just turn it back on again. It's so much energy in these high voltage lines. So this was just a few days ago, you remember. It was very, very, very tragic, of course. In Ukraine, this nasty bunch over here, they had disrupted the electrical grid of Ukraine by threatening a few nodes and knocking out a few nodes. But there was a lot of electricity being generated in big plants that was not affected. But because of the old technology, they had to close the whole network. Because it is true with this inertia, it doesn't work if it's unbalanced. But that's not a feature. And I'm not saying that all of these things will go away. They eventually will, but not in the short term. But we need to have both. We need to have electrical communities that work independent of the higher networks. Okay, so better news. There's already a lot of interesting things happening. And this is, of course, this is computer cables. Did you know that we have a lot of what we call dual infrastructure already today? If you have computer cables in your home, you can connect something called Power over Ethernet. So you can send 15, 30, 60, or 90 watts of energy on your computer cable. And you have lots of other things that can, be used for this. This is something that you use all the time, and it's USB. USB is also dual infrastructure, right? You can both send information, you can connect your computer and can download the photos from the family vacation, but you can also charge your phone. Same cable. And what this is, it's the other way of distributing electricity. It's direct current, or likström in Swedish. Did you know that 70% of all of your needs inside your home, on an average home in Sweden, the average day, is already on direct current? That's why your LED lights become so darn hot. Because you have 230 and then you convert it down to direct current inside each of the devices. If we had a big distribution on direct current, do you know how much transfer losses we would avoid? Half. We would reduce half of our national transit losses if we were on DC. Why didn't they build that when this was Edison and Westinghouse and these things? Well, they didn't have power electronics. You need that to be able to build these things on DC for long distances. But on short distances, it's already there. The solar panels, it's DC. The batteries are DC. All of this electrification of the transport industry is DC already. Your USB, your power, when you have a Wi-Fi in here, I'm sure it's already on Power over Ethernet, it's DC. And then you don't need to connect. If you have solar, and then you take it down to the battery, and then you need it to your LED light, you transfer it up to 230, to then transfer it down to DC again. That is what we call in the industry stupid. So we shouldn't do that. Okay. So then, of course, you talk about the batteries, and this is not pointing at any given. This is just a general comment that people do, and it's a very common mistake if you talk about how to look at future and exponential technologies. You take something and you look at it right now in this, but then you don't look at it what kind of curve it's on. If you had asked what would be the cost in 1980 if everybody should be able to have all of their photos available. Yeah, look at that. No, it's never going to happen. Hard drives are so expensive. But it happened to be on this exponential curve. And we couldn't do the packet switched networks. We couldn't do broadband. We couldn't do fiber and all of this if it wasn't for Moore's law. because the faster processors gave us cheaper packet switching. And this is now happening with batteries because the electrification, first it was the mobile phones. So we got smart batteries. Then they took smart batteries and they lumped them together, and then suddenly you had the Tesla batteries. And now we're saying that several European countries have legislation, all of EU have some legislations where we will not allow people to use petrol or fossil fuel engines in cars. That means that every single one of those will have to have some kind of battery pack. It could be large, small, could be, power streets and stuff like that, but they will have batteries. That means that we'll get an enormous amount of batteries produced. And that means that the cost per storage will go down. Okay, let's take a very, very simple example on how to do this smart, because this is just how you build these different things. Let's see, I'll have a little bit of time. So this is hard drives, and we talked about all the family photos. If you have all of the family photos digitally, you don't want to lose them, right? And everybody's ever had a hard drive crash? Anybody had that? Yes. And then you think, oh no, it's not gonna, and then once you've experienced it, you say never again. And so what do you do? Well, you could build a hard drive. This is more of the big dick energy kind of solution. You could build it like, yes, let's build it with higher precision. Let's make it really, really robust. But what happens is that you get into another type of an exponential curve, which is that the returns on your investment becomes less and less because it's harder to fix because you're already at such a high degree of perfection. So this is how they try to do it. But then they came up with something smarter, which is RAID. And this is how you can do the same kind of redundancy with being smart. Instead of building one big battery that's going to have everything for your house, if you have standard battery, but you have two of them, and they only cost, this, so that one of them is available, you can do that for this price instead of this price. So instead of 10,000 euros, you have the 4 nines at 200 euros. This is the kind of effect that we will see when we can distribute the energy between the local storages instead of having that you have to take every corner case into your thing. Okay, so this one. Dreaming again, talking about the impossible. Haven't we told you that it can't be done? Well, if you look on the European Union, they have done a lot of really interesting things. And you can read about this, energy communities. It's a thing. They want this to happen. Energy communities is now a legal term in EU legislation, and then it's trickling down into the country's legislation. And they say like this: flexibility to the electrical system through demand response and storage. That is a bureaucratic word for distribution. So this is not really new. We have done this for fiber for many, many years. So if you have, if it's not like Stokap, which Lars has built here, but if you don't have that kind of thing, it could be very expensive to get a fiber line to your building. But if you build a new area, let's say that you build 10 buildings, instead of everybody paying 2,000 euros to get a connection and then paying a monthly cost to subscribing to the fiber network, instead you take one connection from the north, one connection from the south, and then you build an area network that connects the 10 buildings, and you own that together in the same way as you own a sauna or something. It's a collectively owned between the different real estate. Now we're just going to do the same thing for electricity. Because if you have what EU says, an energy community, it means that you don't have to have 10 meters connected to the national grid. It means that you doesn't have to buy electricity only one by one. You could buy it as an energy community. And you only buy it when you really need it from the outside. And it also gives you a good redundancy, because if the outside disappears in a zombie apocalypse, everything still works because it's non-hierarchical. And it's happening in Sweden. So 1st of January this year, it is now legal to build these kind of new cables between the real estates. In the same way as you remember with the orange car from 1981, the rules have changed. Because people could ask, why haven't they done this? Well, until January this year, it was illegal to connect two different buildings and share energy between them if you weren't the incumbent owning the electrical grid. But now it is. And that's because EU is pushing the energy community agenda. And it's already happening. So this is just a building in Lund called Exploria. It's done by the municipality-owned company LKF, so Allmännyttan, public housing. And none of the apartments here are connected to the Swedish electrical grid. All of them are connected to a local network with a battery, and then they have solar. And then they can buy from the grid. And what we're now doing is that we're connecting it to another building. This is an area in Helsingborg. This is how this physical thing we talked about in the middle, all of the connections to internet goes into there, and then it goes out to the different buildings in the area. And we also distribute electricity. Every single one of these real estate can share electricity from this building here. And then inside the buildings, we use Ethernet, power over Ethernet, so that if the power goes in the area, they can still run their door stations. They can run emergency lights. They can run critical infrastructure like internet and Wi-Fi. Exactly the kind of thing that Ukraine creates the safety points about. The basic human needs in a crisis these days has to do with information. And you want energy, and if it's really cold, you want to have some heat and that. But this is built in from the beginning in every single of the new homes. Because if you do it in greenfields, when you are opening the street to put down the fiber or put down the electrical cable, the cost of an electrical cable to a home, 70% of that is digging. But if you're building a new area, it's very cheap to put down 2 cables instead of 1. Okay, and this is a great place. This is just a little fun for the Swedish audience, and that is, I live in Lund, which is a university community, and this is our land, one of our land neighbor municipalities called Sjöbo. And it's not often that we go from Lund to Sjöbo to visit the future. So we wanted to take this and highlight it. Because they have solar, wind, they have the hydrogen, they have the batteries, and it's all working, and it's easy to do. And this is the guy who did it, and he said, I don't understand why not everybody does this. It wasn't even hard, it wasn't that expensive. And then if we're connecting them with each other, these buildings, then it's going to be even better. Okay, so the future is already here, and that's the initial presentation. And maybe I have time for some questions. That would be great. Yay, thank you.